Well, ladies, I've so been looking forward to retreat. And as I've been looking forward to retreat, I really believe that when we break from our usual routine and we come to a space like this and we ask God to speak, what we're doing is we're posturing ourselves in a way that's declaring two things. It's declaring that we believe what's happening right now matters in our lives. When we pause, pausing is a big deal. Pausing is a big deal, especially for women who have things going on. When we pause, we are declaring, God, I believe that you've got something for me. And it also declares, our posture of a pause also declares, I believe you have something for the future. I believe that there is something worth pausing for. And so today I am excited because we're declaring, God, you're doing something now, even if what's happening right now seems hard to see what God is doing. And we're declaring, God, I believe that you have something for me for the future. And so today I'm praying that we get refueled for whatever God has for us. You know, a couple weeks ago, I was driving around Austin, and I forgot to say I do live in Austin. I did spend a lot of years here at High Street, and just wanted to brag on myself a little bit. I can actually drive into Austin and back to a couple places because I live in the suburbs without a GPS. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm doing well for myself. And so, anyway, but I was driving around and I had a friend with me. We were kind of on mission doing some things for the church. Well, I had to stop and get gas, and so I, did the routine. Went out, swiped my card, put the nozzle in the tank, got back into chat because you want to really take care of every moment you have. Why would you stand outside when there's 2 minutes that you could be talking? So I sat back inside, we were talking, I look up, we're filled, we're good. So then I got out and, finished it up, got back in the car, turned it on, and that's where the story kind of gets a little crazy. I turned it on, and the gas gauge didn't go to full. And so we were like, what in the world? This has never happened before. And so we talk about it for a minute. We're like, that's so weird. So I'm like, well, listen, my gas gauge is broken, and we moved on. So we went around town. We went all around town doing our mission. We were on mission, doing our thing. The next day, I'm driving around, and all of a sudden, I'm just cruising, and I just stop because my car just completely gives out of nowhere. And so my car just comes to a complete halt. I was on the phone with my mom, actually, and I'm chatting, and I'm like, whoa, 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 my car has stopped. And so she and which is not a great thing to say when you're on the phone with your mom, so I was like, I've got to go. She's like, call me back. So I went, so anyway, so I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but I've actually experienced it several times in my life, but my car stopped. But when it stops, you still have a little bit of your forward motion, right? It's kind of that science thing still happening. So I was like, all right, I think I can get out of the road. So I pull into what was going to be the parking lot, but as soon as I pulled into it, I forgot there's a little bit of an incline. And so, yeah. So I put it in park, and then I was like, okay, what happens next? I need to turn on my flashers. Guys, I only turn on my flashers when I'm getting my car inspected. And even then, the guy has to be like, it's right there. Because I'm like, I never know where they are. And so I'm like, it seems like forever. There's cars going on around. I'm just like, what in the world? I turn on my flashers, and not a second goes by, and a huge truck comes behind me with a bunch of men. And they're they see me, and I guess they just they know, this is not good. And so they get out, and they're no questions asked. They're like, here, let's push you into a spot. I'm like, this is awesome. I love America. And so I was so patriotic that day. I was like, this is the best place to live. And so they get out of their car, they push me into my spot. At this point, another guy who was in the spot, in the parking lot, has also decided this is my project also. And so we've got the guys in the truck, we got this guy right here. And so the first thing you do is you jump the car, right? That's probably the first step. So we're getting ready. The guy hands me the jumper cables to put on my battery. And I'm like, okay. And this older man goes, no, and grabs them, puts them on there for me. And so I'm there, and it doesn't work. So now we're all trying to figure this thing out. And I'm like, I want you to have all the information. My gas gauge is broken. I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but I just I don't know about cars. And so we talk about it, and And finally, I'm like, you guys can go. Thank you so much. Like, it's been 15 minutes. These men probably have lives. And so I'm like, you guys can go, really. I have people I can call. So then they go, and I'm like, wait, who do I have that I can call? So I call my boss. Like, I'm just like, I don't know. And also, I'm not at work. So obviously, I have to, like, let her know that I'm not at work. So I'm like, hey, I was on my way back, and my car stopped. I don't know what's going on. She's like, we'll send someone. So someone came, they tried to figure out what was going on, and then I got in his car. We went back to church. I called a towing company, and I was like, hey, can you bring this to the shop over there? This is awesome. I called the shop. I'm like, listen, I don't know what's up. Gas gauge is broken. I'm not sure. So they take it, and like at this point, everyone in the office knows that I don't have a car and something's up, and I don't know what it is. And so anyway, so we're like speculating. So like one guy hears that I'm on the phone with my insurance, hands me the keys to his van. He's like, I'll just drive my wife's car. And I'm like, wow, God is good. Like, this is great. So I have the keys to that. Then I go to office, like the different offices. I'm trying to get on with my day because I'm not stressed. I'm fine. I really was. And they're like, I heard about your car. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I have no clue what it is. And like they're trying to figure it out. At this point, it's like a group project. And so I'm like, really, guys, let's get on with it, okay? We got stuff to do. So finally, a couple hours after my car got to the shop, I got a call from the mechanic. And the mechanic's like, hey, Miss Lyons, I've got word about your car. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So like I take a deep breath because the thing we know is it's going to be expensive, right? So I'm like, what is it? Like, is it my radiator? Like, and so I'm just like, okay. And he's like, is there a radiator in a car? Okay, good. I was like, I think you guys are laughing. And I was like, wait a minute. I was just picking something that I thought was a car thing. So the guy's like, Miss Lyons, you ran out of gas. And I was like, what? I was shocked. I told him, I was like, no, my gas gauge is broken. That's probably why you think that. And he's like, no, we ran tests on it, and we filled it up with gas, and it's fine, okay? So I was like shocked. I couldn't get over it. Like, I was just like, I'm shocked. I'm embarrassed. The whole church knows about this, right? I'm glad I didn't send out like a church-wide email. That is really great. And so here's the thing. I was so shocked that this happened. Like, I'm like, listen, I told the mechanic, I'm trying to explain myself because I'm trying to save face. And so I'm like, listen, I was like, I put gas in my car yesterday, okay? I'm not an idiot. And so, anyway, and so I'm like explaining it to him. Like, the mechanic doesn't care what this like little girl has to say about her car, right? She doesn't even know a radiator's in there. And so, anyway, so I'm trying to explain, and really, really what happened was I had to pay for someone to tell me that I ran out of gas. Like, I had to pay them to run all the tests to find out that I ran out of gas. And so here's the deal, though. I still was trying to figure out, how did I get in this position? Like, I could not figure it out because I got gas. You guys remember? Like, the last day. Okay. So I tried to figure this out. So then I was, like, kind of going through what happened. And while I was out and about running errands, I went through the motions of getting gas, right? I thought that I got gas, but I never really got gas. And so that's what happened. And I realized, well, I saw the numbers on the screen. And never mind that my tank can't even hold 15 gallons. I wasn't going to tell you that part, but she goes, wow, you can do 15 gallons? And so I'm like, I always did 10. I don't know how this happened. And so anyway, so I'm like, what happened? I checked my credit card statement to see if I had this theory that I was like pumping air and I had to go back to the gas station and like tell them what's up. And anyway, so I was trying to figure it out. And I realized that I really was just going through the motions. The numbers were probably from the person who got gas before with a tank that could hold 15 gallons. And that makes sense. And the deal was my gas gauge wasn't broken at all. My gas gauge was dead on. And the truth is, everyone in this room is on mission. Everyone in this room has something important to do. Spending time with that couple whose marriage is on the brink of disaster, that matters. Investing in that college student or that high school student and telling them that God loves them and made them on purpose for a purpose, that matters. creating environments in our church that are welcoming, where people who are far from God can come and feel welcome and feel wanted. That matters. And so as we think about what we are doing, we're doing important things that absolutely matter. But to be able to continue what God has called us to do, we have to do more than just going through the motions of getting refueled. The fact that you came here this weekend says so much. You care. What you're doing matters. That's why you came. But sometimes we can come and we can go through the motions of being refueled, but we're not actually getting refueled. Sometimes we look at our gauge and we're like, I'm doing fine. The gauge is broken. Like, I really am doing fine. But we can't ignore the gauge in our life. You know what the gauge is for us? Well, do we have peace? Do we have joy? What's our health like? I mean, these are gauges that God gives us to indicate if there is something that needs to happen. But so many times we go through and we keep on going and we just say, hey, no big deal, I'm fine. My gas gauge is broken. I'm really just fine. And what will happen is eventually we'll come to a complete halt, just like I did. And a lot of people pay a lot of money for experts to simply tell them what their gauge has been telling them this whole time, that they just ran out of gas. And so today, let's ask God to fill us up. Let's ask God not to allow us just to sit here and go through the motions, but that we would really be filled so that we can get back to doing what we do. Because, ladies, what we do, it absolutely matters. And so before we go any further, I just want to pray and invite God to really refuel us. Lord, I come to you today and I thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of what you are doing around this world. God, I believe that you have big things in store for today and big things in store for the future. And God, we are passionate about reaching people for you, but God, we also know that we can't do this by ourselves. We need you to fuel us. So we ask you to fuel us today, and we ask you to give us what we need. Even if we don't know what it is, God, you know what it is. So we invite you to speak to us today. In Jesus' name, amen. So this past year, this past year and a half, I've kind of been in a season of transition. I was here at High Street for a really long time. And when you're in a place for a really long time, you start to get visions of what your ministry could look like, you know? You start to, like, you know these people. You're like, I can't wait for that person to get saved. And, like, you have this vision and you have this goal. And then when you go through transition or start something new and start a new phase, all of a sudden, all those things that kind of fueled you and, like, got you going in ministry, all of a sudden, they're, like, gone. And you have to recalibrate and try to figure out what God has in store for you in this new season. And so this past season, I really feel like God has really used the life of Elisha to really help me, help recalibrate how I was viewing life, help inspire me, help refuel me when I need to be refueled. And so as I thought about what to share with this group right here, I thought that I'd just share with you a couple things that God has taught me through the life of Elisha this past year. You know, sometimes when I'm praying for God to do something big in my life and the situations feel like they're coming at me, like I really turn to God, and sometimes I ask God for something drastic. Do you guys ever get in the spot where you're like, God, little's not going to cut it. I need you to do something big. Can I just get anybody? Thank you. Okay, good. Whew, not the only one. So here's the thing. Sometimes I'm just asking God to do something big, and I'm asking God to do something drastic. But what I've come to realize is that often what makes the biggest difference in whatever season we're in actually has nothing to do with our circumstances, but has everything to do with our posture toward Him. And sometimes we underestimate the power of a shift. So I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you to say, don't underestimate it. Turn to your neighbor, say it. Don't underestimate it. Okay, turn to the person on the other side, that was your second choice, and said, seriously, don't underestimate it. We can't underestimate the power of a shift. And when I started to think about this concept of a shift, I looked up the definition, because whenever I'm listening to messages and stuff, everyone's like, let's look up the definition. So I thought, well, I'll do that. We'll try that out. So I looked it up, and here's what it says, okay? The definition of shift is a slight change in position, direction, or tendencies. And sometimes we underestimate the small things, but they actually have the power to change the direction of our destination. We underestimate the power of small things. The author, Bob Goff, he tells this story about how he was going to sail from California to Hawaii, and he was going to do like this navigation through the stars. I don't know. And so anyway, so he was going to do that, but he started talking about how he was preparing for that. And he was trying to figure this out. He also didn't know, by the way, at the time. So it was all new to him. And so he was saying, okay, so he knew that his plan was to go to Hawaii. That's the direction. And so as he's trying to figure out how to get to Hawaii, he has to navigate, right? But he said, here's the deal. If I'm this much off, I want to end up in Japan. And he said, it is so important that the power of something this small has the power to absolutely take us to a destination that we don't want to go. If you guys love Japan, I love Japan too. I'm not against Japan. But anyway, I just wanted to give that disclaimer. But listen, if we want to make it for the long haul, we have to be intentional about making these seemingly small shifts. And so today we're going to start in 1 Kings 19:19. So if you have your Bibles, feel free to join me there. And we're just going to dive into Elisha's life. So Elijah went out and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing fields where there were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elijah went over to him and threw his cloak across his shoulders and then walked away. Elisha left his oxen standing there, ran after Elijah, and said to him, "First, let me go kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you." Elijah said, "Go on back, but think about what I have done to you." So Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. And so this right here is the part of the story where Elisha is called into what God has for him, called into ministry. This was kind of a big moment. And it's kind of a dramatic moment too. You know, God's calling him, and so he's like, he gets, I mean, it's really dramatic. I've heard of a lot of people's calling stories, but I've never heard somebody walking by and going, like, but that's what Elijah did. So then he's like, okay. And so anyway, and so he says, let me go back to my father and mother. And so here's the deal. Elijah's saying, no, follow me now. Follow me now. And here's the cool thing about Elisha. He does. Like, to me, I'd be like, where are we going? Well, what's the plan? No, but Elisha is like, I'm in. So why, but here's my question. If he's in, that's great. Just go. Why did you burn the plows? Like, I mean, if I was Elisha, I would have been like, okay, awesome. Let me just settle my stuff real quick. Like, maybe I'm going to sell my business. He's got a pretty great business. That way I have like a nest egg in case this doesn't work out, kind of a backup plan. Or maybe he's like just going to like have somebody manage his business. But like, I mean, there's a lot of options here, right? I mean, this is a pretty great thing. I can follow God, but then I can go back here when this doesn't work out. It's going to be awesome. But what I love about what Elisha does, he doesn't just say yes to God. He also says, and by the way, I'm all in. I'm burning my livelihood, all right? And he's throwing a barbecue for his community. He loves his people. It's awesome. And so he's burning his plows, and then he goes in. He's saying, listen, God, I'm all in, and I also don't have a backup plan. And you know, what's unique about this room is that's not a foreign concept to us, is it? I know that as I look out here, there are some of you who you burned your plows, and you went all in, and you said yes to God last year. And that's awesome. And then there are some of you who you burned your plows, you said yes to God, and you said, I'm all in, there's no backup plan, and you did it 50 years ago. And that's incredible. Burning your plows and saying yes to God and not having a backup plan, that is an incredible step of faith. And I think about the people that I know that have burned their plows. I actually think about my grandparents. My grandpa's back here, and I think about my grandparents and how they burned their plows. They burned their plows in 1964. They got on a ship with their entire family, and they went to a country they had never been to across the world. They didn't do a survey trip, people. They just heard God say, I want you to go. And I want you to go and I want you to tell the Filipino people about Jesus. And so they said, okay, I'm in. And I'm burning my plows and I'm all in. And so in the middle of the ocean, my grandma turns to my grandpa and says, do you think that we'll be able to fit a refrigerator in one of those huts we'll have to live in? Guys, that's a burning the plow story. They burned their plows. They were all in. I think about my life and how God called me into serving him with everything. And so I went to BBC. And disclaimer, you don't have to go to Bible college to go all in. There's a lot of people and a lot of different ways to go all in, but for me, that was my path. And so I went to BBC. I said, God, I'll do whatever you want. And so I took missions, and I was so excited. And like for me, I'm like, I've burned my plows. I have no other plan other than to serve you. And then every summer, I would travel with the recruiting team, and I would go to different youth camps. And at youth camps, I would hear preachers say stuff like this to the students. Guys, give your life to God. Just say yes to God. Like, imagine what God could do with you if you went all in. And I'd be like, yeah, you should do that. And I would celebrate that because I was doing that. But then it became like the summer before my senior year. And I was also still all in. But at this point, I had a lot of friends who had plans after graduation. Like for some of them, they're like, man, I feel called to this country to be a missionary. And I would celebrate that. And then I had some people, they're like going to be a youth pastor over here and had a job lined up. And some people were like, man, I'm called to children's ministry. Like they had specific things. And I'm like, God, I'm all in. But I have no clue what you want me to do. So I would sit at those youth camps and I would hear these stories and I would see these kids surrender to God. And I would sit and I would hear, give your life to God, go all in. God's going to do incredible things. And then I would sit there, and honestly, I was a little bit frustrated with God. I was irritated with God because I was like, God, I've gone all in, and you're not telling me what to do. I don't understand this. I don't understand. I burn my plows. Like, it should just be like a natural progression. Just tell me, I'll do it. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt frustrated. Maybe it wasn't because you didn't know where to go, but maybe the situation just wasn't as smooth as you thought it was going to be. You thought the hardest thing you'd ever have to do in ministry was burn your plows and go. But here's the thing. We have to shift our expectations. That's the first thing that we have to do is shift our expectations. And this is so, so key because burning your plows, that's just the price of admission. That's just the price of admission. I think the reason that we get frustrated sometimes is because we're viewing this thing all wrong. We burned our plows, and then we think it's going to be smooth sailing, and we're irritated when it's not. And we think about it like when you're going into a car wash, and you're just like, you're trying to line up your wheels so that you're on that track, and you've got the guy who's like, right? I don't even think he's paying attention to the wheel. And I'm like, I'm stressed. I don't know if you guys are, as you can tell, car stuff stresses me out. And so he's doing this, and then all of a sudden he's like, what's he doing? He's saying, stop, put it in neutral. There's a sign behind him that says neutral. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's every car wash, right? And so I put it in neutral, and then it's smooth sailing. Like I automatically am going forward. I'm automatically getting better. I'm automatically going toward my goal. And sometimes, and I've thought this. I thought this when I burned my plows and went to Bible college. I thought, this is the hardest decision I'll ever have to make, but I made it. Now I'm at Bible college, and I'm going to do my thing. It's going to be so good. And then I was mad and frustrated with God and depressed, and it's because I had the wrong expectations. I thought about it the wrong way. Burning my plows is awesome, but it's the price of admission. You know what it's really like? It's really more like getting a gym membership. You know what? I know. It's like getting a gym. I thought about not using this because clearly I'm not doing the gym thing, but it's like getting a gym membership, okay? And here's the deal. When you get your gym membership, that's the price of admission. You know, we don't get a gym membership, stick it in our back pocket, and then we're ticked at the gym for not losing weight because we never go, right? The expectations are different. Even when you go, you can go and not do anything, and you still are not going to get in any better shape. You've got to get a plan. You've got to do the work. Are you going to start with cardio? Are you going to do weightlifting? Because I've done those things before, so I know about those things. What are you going to do? You've got to figure it out. And here's the deal. It is more like a gym membership. So we need to shift our expectations because burning our plows is awesome, and we celebrate that, but it's the price of admission. And when we change our expectation, when we shift our expectation, then we're not going to be quite as frustrated with the circumstances that we have. We're going to dive into another part of Elisha's life, and this is 2 Kings 2:9. 2 Kings 2:9 and 9 and 10, and it says this. When they came to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what you can do, or tell me what I can do for you before I am taken away. And Elisha said, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit and become your successor. And then Elijah said, you have asked for a difficult thing. If you see me when I am taken from you, then you will get your request. But if not, you won't. So here's the thing. Elijah tells Elisha that his request was difficult. And guys, Elijah did some cool stuff. So for him to say it was difficult means it was a pretty audacious, big request. And when I think about this part of the story, when we find ourselves doing life, and this is just a good thing to think about, when we find ourselves doing life and we're doing pretty good, like when people are like, man, what's something big you're asking God for? You're like, all set. Like, I don't need anything. That might be an indicator that we need to shift our requests. We need to shift our requests. If we think smooth sailing, I can make everything happen that I need to make happen, then we're probably not dreaming big enough. We need to make that difficult request. We need to make that audacious, big vision before God. We need to bring it before God. And for some of you, as I'm talking, you're thinking, yeah, there's been something in my life that I've been hesitant to ask God about. Not because we don't think he can do it. We're women in ministry. We know God can do all things. But we don't want to ask him because what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? We're scared to actually verbalize it because all of a sudden we're going to put our faith on if God's going to do it. And so we just don't even ask. So for some of you, maybe you're thinking, okay, I do need to ask for that big thing. But for maybe there's some of you who you're like, awesome. I want to ask for a big thing. I have no clue what to ask for. I've lost my vision for my family. I've lost my vision for my church. I've lost my vision for my ministry. I've lost just my vision. So when you're talking about asking God for this incredible, audacious, difficult thing, I want to. I don't know what to ask him for. And that's okay. That's okay to be there, but we can't stay there. We need to recognize, and we need to first, if you're in that spot, ask God to give you a vision. Ask God, I've lost my vision. I don't even know what to ask you for, but I do want you to do big things in my life. Will you please give me a fresh vision? And then the second thing we need to do there is we need to surround ourselves with people who have a big vision. People that you love, people that you enjoy. And you know how I know if I'm surrounding myself with people who have this audacious faith that God's going to do something? When they're telling me about their plan and I know there ain't no way that's happening with just them. You know what I'm saying? If they're telling me they're planning, I'm like, yeah, I think you could do that. Probably not a big enough plan, right? But if God needs to show up and they're like, I believe God can do it, that breathes life into me. That makes me want to ask God for big things. So we need to shift our requests. Mark Batterson says this in his book, Circle Maker. Bold prayers honor God, and God honors bold prayers. So let's be on purpose to shift our request. We're going to dive into another part of Elisha's life. And this is 2 Kings 3:11. But Jehoshaphat asked, that's the king, is there no prophet in the Lord, or is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on on the hands of Elijah. And so what had happened was, so here's what happened. Elisha, he said yes to his calling. He shifted his expectations. And then he said yes to God. He went all in. And then he asked God for a big thing. But then it's kind of silent because, what's happening? You don't see Elisha in the next little bit until we get to this part of the story. So up until this point, all we know that Elisha did for sure was that Elisha was Elijah's servant, and also he held hand sanitizer for him, right? Those are the only things we know for sure. That's not an awesome resume. Like, that's not a great thing. But if anything, it sounds pretty disappointing. I mean, think about it. Elisha was like this businessman. He probably was a great leader. He probably was a visionary. I mean, he was probably a great manager because he had people working for him and with him. And so he had all of these skill sets, all of these things God had put inside of him. And then God said, awesome, leave that, follow me to be the next big thing. No, that's not what happened. Leave that, follow me, because you're going to be Elijah's servant. And he didn't know what was going to happen next. So he was Elijah's servant. He just served in this quiet, unassuming, maybe even forgotten time. And sometimes we can find ourselves questioning what God's doing. Have you ever found yourself questioning what God's doing or what God's timing is? I know that I have. I've asked myself, God, what in the world do you have going on? Have you ever thought, I've got so much to offer, but you're not using these things that you put inside me. I don't get it. And that brings me to point 3. We've got to shift our perspective. You see, just because we can't see that God is at work doesn't mean that he's not working. It means that he's still working. Have you ever found yourself in a season, it was a new season, and you thought to yourself, man, I'm really working hard for God, and you're thinking, but it's not going like I thought. Like, you think back to the season you came from, and in that season, you were like doing your thing. You were working in your sweet spot. You were seeing God do incredible things. You were seeing fruit. You were seeing like this joy. And everything was so good about this season. And you were like, you saw what it looked like for God to actually use the things he put inside of you to serve him. When you get a taste of that, it's hard to go back. And so you're in that season, and then you hear God say, I want you to go to the next season. So you move to the next season. You're like, I'm in, God, remember, I burned my plows. You get here, you're ready. You're like, and nothing. Like, so you're just like, God, I don't get it. Why would you move me from here to here? What are you doing? And in these seasons, it's hard to sometimes remember that these seasons are not senseless. We think God doesn't get it. We think this is just a big waste of time. And I've been in those seasons. I've had those exact same thoughts before. In fact, while I was going through one of those seasons, I was in a virtual community group with some women in ministry, and we meet online from all over the country. And you know what's incredible is like everybody that was in this group was going through like a similar season. Like, we had been in a ministry that God had like been doing some incredible things, and God had moved us to a new ministry, and we were excited, but we were like, what's our place? What do we do? And one of the girls, she was describing this time. She was like, I was working in this incredible church plant. It was so good. Like, I was making a difference, and I could see it. And then God moved me to this church. And when I was in this church, I'm just trying to figure out my place. I just don't even understand, like, what I'm supposed to do. But I believe God's good, and I believe he's got a plan. But it's also hard. And she said, but you know what? God kind of gave me a little bit of a vision of what it looks like. Because the truth is, we all want to get to whatever level God has for us next, right? We don't want to ever plateau. We want to just keep following God, and God, what's next? What's next? And so she said, sometimes we think about this like this steady incline, right? It's just going to keep on keeping on. But she said that she felt like God was giving her a different picture. She said, I really feel like it's kind of more like this. You're rock climbing, and you see, like, there's this rock over there. It's a little bit higher. It's a little bit, and I think that might be for me. And you would think the easiest destination, way to get there would be just to go straight up. But the thing with rock climbing is sometimes to get from this rock to that rock, you actually have to go down to this rock so that you can reach that rock, and you don't actually see the whole thing. And so you just see that you're going down, and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, God, what are you doing? And she said, I really feel like God whispered in my heart, there's no useless motion if you're following me. There's no useless season if you're following me. There's no wasted time. You're not going to just plateau if you keep on leaning into God and keep on being plugged into God. And so I don't know if that's your season, but we need to shift our perspective. And then, so here, Elisha, he gets pulled out of this anonymous season. And God puts him on the map. We know God can do that anytime. God can absolutely do that. God could take you out of your anonymous season this afternoon. God could take you out of your season that feels like a winter, feels like everything's awful, and he can say, hey, I'm moving you right now. And that's going to be awesome, and let's celebrate when that happens, but let's not lose what God's doing in us during this season. God's strengthening our core. God's doing something, and we've got to lean into that. So Elisha, he gets put on the map. The king hears about him. And then as you read through the life of Elisha there, you see him doing like some incredible miracles, like miracle after miracle after miracle. God's doing incredible things. And one of the things he gets to do, and this is just like, I feel like, I don't know why there's not a movie about Elisha, but here's the thing. The king of Israel, there's another king who is trying to kill him. He has all these assassination plans. So he makes these assassination plans, and then they go to kill the king of Israel. But what they don't know is God's telling Elisha these assassination plans, so the king of Israel keeps moving around, and this king can't kill him. So he's like, there's got to be a mole. There's a mole in the camp. Who is it? And so finally, somehow, someone tells the king, listen, there's no mole. It's this man of God over here. He knows everything you're saying in secret, and he is warning the king. So the king's like, no problem, let's kill him. So what happens is, and this is where we pick up our story, the king goes after Elisha. Elisha is in this tent, and he has his servant with him, and this is where we pick up the story because the king has now surrounded him. 2 Kings 6:15. 2 Kings 6:15. Guys, this is a crazy story I just want to give you up front. Like, you probably already know this, but it's nuts. Okay, so when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the eyes of the servant. He looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemies came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike this army with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, and Elisha asked. And then this next part is just straight from this is probably where they got the idea for Star Wars and the Jedi mind tricks, okay? Because it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi says, Elisha says, this is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. And then he led them to Samaria. I mean, this is an amazing, amazing story. You see, what happened was Elisha shifted his eyes from the impossible situation around him to the God who could do the impossible. Have you ever felt like you've been trapped by your circumstances, that there's no way out? This next shift, this final shift we're going to talk about, it's paramount in getting refueled and believing that the best is yet to come. We must shift our focus. In these moments where, humanly speaking, we're done. God shows up and he shows off. But if we can't see past the flesh and blood, we can't believe that God is doing something bigger, then we're going to feel defeated. See, maybe, I don't know your story. Maybe you felt like God was calling you to go to another country. So you went around and you asked hundreds of churches to partner with you in your vision. And somewhere along the line, a roadblock hit and you can't get over that roadblock and you think, God, what are you doing? You feel surrounded. You feel like there's no way out. Maybe you and your husband, you took a church and you were so excited, but little did you know that you were actually stepping into a financial disaster, and the people who asked you to come because they wanted change, they didn't want change when you started to change. And you think, God, why did you bring me here? It seems like there's no way out. Maybe for some of you, you have family or you have friends who are sick, or maybe they're far from God and your heart hurts so bad for them, you think there's no way you'll ever find joy again. Maybe you're a family who believed that God was calling you to plant a church in that city. You had a vision. You even had a team around you. And then when you burned your plows and went, the team decided, hey, actually, I don't think we're going to go. So you're in a new city. And you're wondering if that vision that led you there will ever happen. These are times in our lives where we feel like we're in this impossible situation and you can't see a way out. In these seasons, we might be tempted to throw in the towel, But if we don't give up, if we continue to believe that God promises still stand, if we connect with a God who never fails us, if we shift our focus from the mountain in front of us to the God who made it, if we start rehearsing back to God all the times that he's come through in the past, and we believe that when he says he began a good work in you, that he will be faithful to finish it, that he really will be faithful to finish it. If we don't forget that we serve a God who shows up and who does amazing things. You see, Elisha, he was surrounded. Daniel, he was in the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were thrown into a fire, and Jesus died on a cross. People thought it was over, but little did they know that this was all part of God's plan, and he uses these situations to make his name great. So here's the deal. When you feel like you're in the battle, when you feel like you're in the fire, when you feel like you're in a den of lions and you think you might just die, remember that God saved Elisha. Remember that God shut the mouths of lions. And God saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they didn't even smell like smoke. He raised Jesus from the dead and defeated death and the grave, and this is the God we serve. This is the God who we come to when we ask him, do it again. Are you in a fire? Are you in a hidden season maybe? Have your dreams died, or have you just simply ran out of gas? I have good news for you. Jesus is here. And this Jesus is not just the Jesus for the people we serve. He's the Jesus. He's our Jesus. And he can do incredible, incredible things. And we just have to be faithful, and we just have to remember that this God who has done incredible things, he can do it again. Let's stand together and let's sing.